are available. So the plan is to talk about the care cap, try and make it a little clearer than the headlines have done, and dispel a few myths. I don't know if anybody's heard Prime Minister's question time today, so I'll certainly try and make it a little bit clearer than that went earlier. But it is important, before I sort of talk about what the changes are going to be, or the proposed changes, just important that we kind of make sure we're all on the same page as to how the system works currently. There's no point talking about how it's going to be if we don't understand how it is now. So we'll look at both those aspects. We will specifically talk about the property. Again, that seems to be the sticking point, or the concern. Does a property have to be sold to pay for care or not? There's some loose language that's often used around the property, and people think that the local authority will take a property, physically take it from somebody. So we'll just calm all of that down and tell you how it is. And then we will have a look at, if it were to turn out that the cap isn't quite as it seems, is there a way that people can cap their own costs? So is there a way to sort of take action as a family yourselves? So that's the plan. Hopefully you're at the right event, and that these are the questions that you are hoping to have answered. But just before I go into the detail on that, let me just introduce ourselves a little more formally. So we're a firm of SOLLA accredited IFAs. So SOLLA is an organisation at the sort of gold standard, the kite mark, where you would look to find an IFA that specialises in later life matters. Now, unlike pretty much all our SOLLA colleagues, we at Eldercare, we specialise purely, exclusively in care funding advice. So if you were to ask me for some pensions advice, what's the best mortgage out there, what's the best type of, or best premium you can get for life assurance, I'm qualified in all of that, but I haven't practiced it for 20 years. Ask me anything care fees and I can help. So that's why the business was set up, just to specialise, and it's my company. I actually set it up in its current format in 2007, and I did that because we went through this care journey with my grandparents and we got no advice. Not blaming anybody for that, we simply didn't know what we didn't know, so we didn't ask to be signposted anywhere because we thought we had it all nailed. We thought we knew what was what. We sold the property, and lo and behold, all of that money went. And it was only later on in my professional life that I found out that could have been avoided in part. So that's why the business was set up, just to share and inform. And whilst we're here at Paul's very kind invitation today, we don't have any links with care providers, but we work with many. So it's just about getting good information, the right information, to the people that need it. Because we are having money conversations, you would expect us to be, and we are indeed, regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So you will find Eldercare Solutions listed on the register. And I'm talking to you actually today from Hertfordshire, but location, even pre-pandemic, obviously we've got used to working remotely, but even pre-pandemic, we did deliver most of our consultations to family members virtually, one way or another, be that telephone, email, be it FaceTime, and of course more latterly Zoom. And the reason simply was that families often are spread around the country or even the globe. And these are really important conversations and discussions. So we didn't want anything to be lost in translation. So doing it this way, we kind of got an audit trail and we can make sure everybody's on the same page. And just to reassure you, there will not be any invoices coming through the post for attendance to this event. It is truly free. In fact, 90% of the calls and emails that we respond to, the chats that we have with people, roughly 90% are non-income generating for us. We do those on a kind of pro bono basis. You have to find out if we're the right people to help you. We don't know if we can help you till we speak with you. So there's no benefit to anybody in setting hourly rates for those conversations. There is a fee that would be payable to us a long way down the line if we were to research a particular financial product for you and you were to take that product out. But all of this would be explained and agreed with you in advance. So that's us. Now back to the agenda. Let's be clear on who actually pays for care currently, how the system works. And in very, very simple terms, there are three ways that your care can be paid for. It might be paid for by the local authority, social services, the council. If not, it could be paid for by our much loved National Health Service. But if you don't get funding from either of those two streams, that's what puts you into the self-funding category. Private fee payer is another term that's used for a self-funder. So if we take those in turn and we look at the local authority funding first, before any conversations about money are supposed to happen, a social worker from the adult social care department should carry out a care needs assessment on an individual. Actually, carers can have this assessment as well to see if they qualify for respite and so on. But it's all about meeting somebody's care needs. And if they don't think that you qualify under their criteria, they don't think perhaps that you need to go into a care home or you don't really need any support in your own home. If you don't sort of pass that first hurdle, then regardless of your financial position, they're not going to help out. So you have to meet their eligibility criteria for care first and foremost. And obviously that varies around the country. And I think it's fair to say the criteria is getting tougher year on year. So the benchmark for qualification is going up. It is only after the care needs assessment has been done that any conversations about money should take place. That's the theory. Doesn't seem to work like that all the time in practice. Quite often the first question that's asked is, does your mum have a house? That's not the order of events. So the financial assessment is more commonly known as a means test. So that should happen only after the care needs assessment's been done. What's the means test trying to find out? Well, in very simple terms, very crude terms, if you're in England or Northern Ireland, it's trying to find out whether you have above or below £23,250. Now, people think in Scotland it's free and it's super generous. Well, the means test limit in Scotland is only a few £1,000s more than it is in England. But in Wales, who knew? It's actually £50,000, the capital limit. And that's per person. These figures are per person. So as a couple, 100,000 if you live in Wales is the capital limit, below which you would be eligible for means tested support. Now, this is part one of the proposed changes. I'm doing it a little bit sort of out of order, but this is where it sits. One of the key proposals, and the one that doesn't seem to be getting as much press, is that in England, that 23,250 limit will be increasing nearly fourfold to £100,000. So that on the face of it is quite generous and more generous than Wales and a big improvement of where we are. Anyone familiar with the current system will know that even when you reach 23,250, there's a lower capital limit, currently 14,250. And if you have anything between the two, you still have to pay a bit from your savings. That's called tariff income. Now, in October 2023, it seems tariff income is still going to exist and it's going to be worked out the same way. Without over confusing you, what it does mean is that somebody coming into the system with £100,000, they'll still initially have to pay about 300 a week, thereabouts, from those savings. So that 100,000 will go down and it won't stop going down until it reaches £20,000. So that's good and not so good, but actually when we do the numbers, it does mean for most people that the tariff income point, after 4 years of being in care under this 100,000 threshold, you still might have 50,000 left. So it is definitely an improvement, but it's the one that isn't really being spoken about very much. And when we come on to talk about the cap shortly, it's how these two systems, this means tested system, how does that interact with the care cap system? That's the bit where detail is most certainly missing. And I look forward to seeing the white paper next year to have some proper worked examples about how the two will cross over. But suffice to say, for the purposes of today, the capital limit looks like it will be going up dramatically. That's a good thing. Now, it's not, well, let's actually look at what counts as capital. And this is the bit that we've seen no changes. So everything I say in this section is still going to be the case in 2023. Now, that means pretty much everything you own will count as capital. That will count towards the 23 or the 100 threshold. If you're a couple, or it's mum and dad, aunt and uncle that we're talking about, it's only the capital that's owned in the name, solely in the name of the person going into care, that counts. So the spouse, if they have savings in their own name, assets in their own name, those don't get included in the means test. And of course, anything jointly, this is quite logical, anything jointly owned savings wise, it's half that's taken into account. So there is most certainly a case for, if you have a joint bank account or a joint savings account, that you would separate that out. Don't mess with the percentages, leave your 50-50, 50% coming out, just transfer it into something solely owned. That would be quite sensible. So that's important if you're a couple. And this was the bit that was quite interesting in the Boris questions today, because he just banded around, and you'll see it in the transcript, that your property will be disregarded from 2023. Well, your property's always been disregarded and will continue to be disregarded if you are living in it. So if you're having care in your own home, your property value cannot be included in the means test. And also, if you move out of the property into residential care, but your spouse or a relative over 60, and a couple of other exceptions, if they remain living in it, that's always been the way, that's not changing, there's nothing new there. And it is important, this disregard, to be clear on it, because if it is a couple, one goes into care, one stays in the property, it's not the case that they'll sort of come back at a later point and collect what they're owed the local authority. The disregard is for the entire time that the spouse lives there. If we have somebody move into care, spouse stays at home, spouse dies, from that day forward, yes, the property value can be included in the means test for the one in care. Any questions about property? There's lots of different scenarios that we can pick up offline. The only other thing that's worth mentioning here, really, that's an exception that isn't included in the means test, is if somebody has investment bonds. That's something that they may have taken out if they took advice over the years with a lump sum. And if that investment bond includes an element of life insurance, again, we can see and guide you. We can tell normally from the paperwork quite quickly. So an investment bond, for whatever reason, is not included in the means test. Now, it's all very well sort of talking about capital, but income counts as well. So it's in a couple scenario, it will be the individual in care, it will be all of their state pension, but if they have a partner and a private pension, they can pay up to 50% of that private pension, annuity, whatever, how you want to phrase it, to the spouse at home. So not all income is included. And in any event, when you're means tested, there's a generous £24.90 a week that you're allowed to keep from your state pension, but that's about it. Now, when the local authority means test somebody, so you're under the limit, they work out how the payments are going to work. They, of course, have a limit on what they'll pay. So they're unlikely to pay for a luxury Chandler Court beautiful home necessarily from day dot, but they'll limit what they pay. Now, they are supposed to, this is how it should work, is there should always be a care home place on offer that the local authority will pay for in full, but with you having to contribute your pension back towards that. My point being, there should be a no top-up option. There should always be a care home place on offer that meets the person's needs, and no third party is required to pay a top-up. It's only if the family or the individual doesn't like what's on offer and would prefer an alternative that a third party top up might be required. So that alternative care home may absolutely be at liberty to say, well, the council don't pay very much. You can, of course, come here, but we'll charge a little bit more on top. But there should always be a no top up option on the table, third party top up only if you're making that choice and sort of saying, no, thank you very much. The other time a third-party top-up can be requested is if you start off as a self-funder choose your own care home, move in, later on run out of money, then a third party top up could be requested if the local authority and the care home can't sort of come to an agreement over costs. That will depend when it happens, what the care home contract says. That's something maybe to find out when you're choosing a home. But that's only really the two instances. Under that means test change that we just looked at, the 100,000 capital limit that will apply from 2023, they have said that once your money reaches 100,000 and you become state funded, if you want to pay a top up yourself out of your £100,000, you will be able to do that. So that actually could be helpful if you were otherwise worried about sort of having to move out of a care home because it doesn't take state funding. You can use your 100,000 to top up. So that's sort of broadly a whistle stop of the means tested system. This is all social care that we're talking about here, personal care. That's the top up bit. I can't go into too much detail here because A, we could have a U-turn ahead of us. B, the detail hasn't actually been fully published. But everything I'm going to say to you is based on the care cap as it would have happened when it should have happened in 2016. So there was legislation in 2014 that announced it. It should have happened in 2016. In 2015, they said it would be postponed, and then it was U-turned completely. But there was a lot of information about how it would have worked, and the government is saying that the change it's just announced, that's what it will be based on. All right, so I'm not completely making this up, even though we haven't seen the full detail. What do we know so far? Let's be really, really clear. This care cap system is totally separate to that means tested system that I've just outlined. So I have heard people talking about when your money runs down to 86,000. No, that's the means tested system, and it's when your money runs down to 100,000. The care cap is all about looking at what you're spending on your care and it adding up to. All right, so it's a completely separate but parallel system to the means tested system. We do know that it won't be retrospective. So anybody going into care today, tomorrow, in 2022, whatever they spend on care, that won't count. The care cap clock, your account, will be opened and start ticking from October 2023 onwards. Okay, so that's the first thing we do know. We also know the amount, and everybody knows this, don't they? It's been set at £86,000. So you have this account on a computer that will be clocking up what you're spending on your care until you reach £86,000. Okay, and at that point, you'll get some money from the council as a direct payment if you're still a self-funder. But there is, of course, a possibility that you might have run your savings down to 100,000 before you hit the cap. And so you'll be in the means tested system. Confused yet? You should be. So the cap is £86,000, but, and I think this will have come across in the press quite clearly, it is only your personal care costs that will count. And if you're a self-funder, this bit's really key. It won't be what you're actually paying. It will be a rate set by the local authority. So I've got an example with some numbers just in a second. So see if you can bear with on this. So it's the amount that if the local authority were paying for you, it's only that amount that's going to count towards your clock. Okay. And to make matters a little worse, it won't be the full amount that the council would have paid for you that will count towards your clock. There'll be a minus for daily living costs. I think people have heard this referred to as hotel costs, accommodation costs. It's been clarified, the terminology is daily living costs. And that's now been clarified last week as £200 a week. So let me give you that worked example. If you have chosen, and I've just pulled this figure out of the air, but certainly where I am, £1,300 a week is not unusual for a nice, glorious 5-star hotel feeling care home that as a self-funder is your choice. So £1,300 a week might be the home that you've chosen. But if you had no money and the local authority were paying for you, they say that your needs could be met in a care home costing them £600 a week. Okay, this is the bit we don't know. So until we get nearer, we don't know what they'll say they'll pay for you. But the data and a highly regarded industry report says that the average paid by a council in England is 596. So I've rounded it up to 600. Therefore, the only amount that's counting towards your 86,000 cap is the 600 minus the hotel costs. So 400 a week is what will be clocking up on your computer account held by the council, even though you are actually paying 1,300 a week. So how long is that going to take you to reach the cap? Well, I divide my 400 into 86, 215 weeks, which is just over 4 years from October 2023. So if we look at what you would actually have spent over those 215 weeks without allowing for fee increases or getting complicated, just under £280,000. That's quite a lot more than 86. And no one's talking about that, by the way, out in the press. I think they're not in touch with the real cost of care versus what the council pays. We know in the industry that the council doesn't pay enough, and this is the problem. So if it may well be, and for a lot of people, you're likely to have hit the 100,000 means test limit. Your capital is likely to have run down to 100,000 before you reach the cap. Yeah, if you're actually going to spend 280,000, what if you only had 180,000 to start with? So you could have crossed over to the means tested system by now and be getting state support under that system. But if you're not, if you started off with 400,000, you've spent 279, you hit the cap, what happens? Well, you still have to pay the 200 a week hotel costs, and you still have to pay anything over and above the 600. So what you're getting really is like a glorified attendance allowance. You'll get a direct payment. In this example, it will be £400 a week. Don't get me wrong, grateful. That's good. Better than the current system where you would get nothing in 4 years' time. In 4 years, to get £400 a week to put towards your care costs, thank you very much. But it's absolutely not anything like the notion that you'll only have to spend £86,000 on care. Please don't shoot the messenger. I think it's really important that people understand this, because it is going to affect the choices people make if they start gifting away assets, thinking that they've earmarked the required 86,000 and so on and so forth. So that's how it will look. As I say, there's lots more detail to come through, but actually the confusing bit, the bit that we haven't quite got our heads around, is more those transition people, the people that will hit the 100 before they reach the 86. How's that all going to look? But I'll leave you mulling that over at this point. So just going back to our other funding streams, the NHS, doesn't look like it's going to change at all. So it exists now, and it will still exist from October 2023. This is a whole presentation in itself. So this would be something somebody else, experts that we work with, can talk in great detail. But just for the purposes of today, the importance is this is nothing to do with your money. This is not means tested. This is all about your health needs. And if you have complex, unpredictable, intense, those are all the words that are used, care needs, but they're healthcare needs rather than personal care needs. So if you were in hospital, you wouldn't expect to be given an invoice when you leave just because you're in a care home. If you have those sorts of needs, healthcare needs, the NHS might still pay for you. So they might pay for the lot under continuing healthcare, or they might pay for a bit, which is funded nursing care, just under 190 a week that they pay directly to the care home. So as I say, for the purposes of information overload and time, just be mindful of this. It might not be something that affects you at the start of your journey or your loved one's journey, but it could be something that you qualify for at a later stage. So powers of deduction: if you're not eligible for local authority funding because your assets are too high, not eligible for NHS funding because you're not poorly enough, then you're a self-funder. And currently, the only real state support you're likely to get is attendance allowance. So if you don't know what that is, contact me afterwards. We've got a link to, we can give you the claim number, but this still carries on if you're in a care home, as long as you're self-funding. So lots of people might have it at home and think it stops when they move into care. If you're self-funding, absolutely, you can still claim this tax-free, non-means tested. The only other state support that's available for self-funders is a very sort of niche group, but actually quite a large group, and that is people that own a property, nobody else living there, or it's going to be rented out, for example, and their other money is under the capital limit. This is actually going to affect a lot more people come 2023 because it will be under the capital limit of 100 rather than under the capital limit of 23. But if you fit that category, you're moving out, leaving a vacant property, but your cash is under the capital limit, the local authority has to ignore the value of the property for 12 weeks. So this might give people, or attorneys in particular, a bit of time to think about what they want to do. There's not necessarily a rush to sell. Now, during this 12 weeks, the local authority pay for your care. You don't have to pay the money back, but they will only pay at the local authority rate. So we've already established that that might be a lot lower than the home you've chosen, and you'll still have to contribute your pension towards that, but it is a bit of help. Now, this was a thing brought in 2001, and I think it was in response really to newspaper headlines saying it's disgraceful how many people have to sell their properties. They thought, oh, let's give people 3 months to think about it, but they could still end up selling the property at the end of that. But actually, they did bring something in, and it was brought in all the way back then in 2001. It's not a recent thing. It's certainly not something Boris has brought in, which, if again you listen to the PMQs today, you might have be forgiven for thinking that, because he started to talk about something called a deferred payment agreement. And apparently, according to him, it means you don't have to sell your home to pay for care. That's not true. You just don't have to sell it to pay for your care during your lifetime, but it will have to be sold at some stage when you've died or sooner, and the money will have to be given back. So you absolutely do still, if you're not living in your home and your spouse isn't living in the home, you do still have to use that asset to pay for your care unless you can get hold of the money elsewhere. But you might decide, and this is perfectly fair and reasonable, you or your attorneys might decide to rent the property out. Now, if you're ahead of me, you might realise or think that the rent plus the pension plus the attendance allowance still isn't quite enough to pay the fees. So this is where the loan comes in at the end of the 12 weeks, and you could just borrow what you need. That at least means you've still got an appreciating asset potentially, or it means you've got a slightly extra higher income to go towards the fees. So all local authorities have to offer deferred payments. I say that they can't offer a deferred payment if there's already a loan on there, already a mortgage, if there's very low equity or there's anything wrong with the property. But broadly, as a principle, they have to at least consider it and tell you why they're not going to offer it. Interest is payable, but it's less than 2%. And you're not paying 2% on the house value, you're paying 2% on the amount you borrow, which may just be a couple of thousand a month to start with. So you still have to meet the care needs eligibility criteria. You have to have assets under the threshold, but remember that threshold is changing, and they can lend you what you need. It won't be restricted to the 600 a week council rate that we used in that earlier example. If you need to borrow 1,000 a week, you can borrow 1,000 a week. So it is quite helpful. We will happily advise people and consider with you the pros and the cons. There are some other things to think about, but it is an option that might make the money go a little further. So happy to give advice, and there's certainly nothing to suggest this won't still be around in 2023. So just really in closing, I said I'd share with you sort of the options that if you conclude the care cap isn't quite as it seems, but you do still want to put a cap on what the care costs might be. that's certainly the concern that people have and share with us. They're worried when they're looking for a care home, or even if the care home's already been chosen, without that crystal ball, without knowing how long our loved one will be in care, how on earth do we predict how much money we need? And it is fair to say, and we see stats that say the average stay in a care home is XYZ. I've got just this month 2 clients that sadly we had death notifications, but they first sought advice from us in 2011 and 2010. So they were both in care for longer than a decade. So, you just don't know. Were they extremes? I mean, who knows? One of them was quite young when they moved in, but the other was, I think, 85. So it makes it difficult to predict. The other concern families have is, well, if I do make a choice of a care home, what happens if the money runs out? Okay, that's absolutely a concern, and it's sometimes difficult to get a straight answer. So we will share with families that we talk to a solution that won't be appropriate for everybody. I will level with you now. If we're looking at somebody's finances and we do some cash flow projections, looking at income and savings versus fees, and it looks like they'll only afford their fees for a year, maybe 2 years, there's nothing really that we can do to stop that money running out if they are in care for a year or two. If, however, the cash flow numbers suggest that they can afford the fees for upwards of maybe 3 years, then there's a solution that we'll put forward that might work, that I can be pretty sure 85% of people in that scenario won't have heard of. So if nothing else, please don't take this as me saying you should have one and aren't they amazing. There's pros and cons, but the purpose of this section is just to make sure you're no longer in the 85%. What you do with that information thereafter, of course, is up to you. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the only way that you can genuinely and legally cap costs yourself if the numbers add up. Okay, it's been around a long time, but most people have never heard of it. So what am I talking about? Well, it's a way of insuring care home fees. Unlike car insurance and house insurance, where you have to take it out before the event, you have to take it out before the car accident, etc. This can be taken out at the point of moving into a care home or even after a move into care, provided the numbers stack up. So the technical term, the product term, the Google search engine term is a care fees annuity. Bit of a mouthful, not particularly attractive sounding thing, but not to be confused with a retirement annuity. Now, we have over the years talked to family members, very well educated family members who've contacted accountants, solicitors, bank managers, financial advisors, and even if they've heard of this product, they kind of often bat it away and say, oh, they're very expensive and, da-di-da, but they're generally confusing it with a retirement annuity. So a retirement annuity is a pension, yeah? So you've paid into your pot of money for years and years, working life, you retire, you swap that pot of money for a pension, a retirement annuity. Well, you don't have to anymore, you have pension freedom, but you used to have to swap it for a retirement annuity. Now, if you've got a big pot of money, it looks loads, a million, whatever. If you're 60 and the insurance company thinks you're going to live till you're 90, and you've got a spouse and you want them to carry on getting an income if you're not here, and you want the income to go up every year by 5%, and this is my wish list from my pot of money, is it any wonder that the income doesn't look that great? The insurance company's got to work out how much income to pay for many, many years. But if you take the concept of swapping a lump sum up front, giving it to an insurance company, and in return getting a tax-free income for however long it's needed, might that work in a care home setting where the person's much older, usually, they're going to have normally some health conditions and a shortened life expectancy, otherwise why necessarily is care needed? So the sort of income that you would get from your lump sum, or let's flip it the other way, the size of the lump sum that you'd need to get a particular income is going to look much, much, much more attractive than it would do as a pension product. Okay, that's the basic premise of it. Now, the number one question is always, well, how much would one of these cost? Well, every case is individual. I'm going to sound like a politician trying to swerve the answer, but it's true. If I have a room of 10 85-year-olds and they all need an extra 30,000 a year to pay their care home fees, the lump sum requirement, the amount that the insurance company will ask them to pay, will be different for each one of them, because they'll have written to the GP of each of these people. They'll have written to the care provider. The care provider is going to provide information about day-to-day care needs, and they're the ones that see the person every day, whereas the GP, of course, has got access to everything that's gone on in the past. And between them, they'll provide a medication list. And if the family want to provide any additional assessments or reports or any knowledge they have, all of that's taken into account, and the underwriters look at it, and that enables them to provide a price. So different for everybody. There's no rate tables, and more importantly, the person needing care would not be subject to an assessment or an examination themselves. This all just goes on behind the scenes. So that's important. Now, they're fully portable. So if you buy it to cover one care home, move to another care home, you take it with you, or have it care at home, take it with you to a care home. And fees will go up. We will get quotes when we do this. Our job is sort of like the go compare meerkat. We talk to the family, we find out what's needed, and then we run off to the market and get all the available quotes and report back to you. And we get the quotes with different variables. So you can see, well, look, what would it cost if I have a flat income and I cover fee increases myself from the money that's left over? What happens if I want to build an increase into the plan itself? You know, those sorts of what ifs will get you the range of options. Now, they are, I think I have to level with you and use quite crude language. These products are a gamble. They are gambling on somebody's life expectancy, and we don't know which way that gamble will work. Will it go in favour of the estate because the individual lives far longer than the insurer thought? Or does it sort of go against the estate value because the person dies soon after the plan's been purchased? And in that scenario, ordinarily, there's no money paid back. But we recognise that. And there are options. Of course, they come with a cost, but there are options to protect capital, so you can pay a bit more and make sure that money is refunded in the event of an early death. Or you can buy these policies with a deferred start date, so a little bit like having a voluntary excess on your car insurance. So you still buy the plan today, but it doesn't pay out for a year, or it doesn't pay out for 2 years. You're committed, you've bought and paid for it, but it's much cheaper to buy because the insurer doesn't have to pay out for the first year or second year. So it's a way of making sure that if mum or dad were to die soon after you've bought it, if you've bought the cheaper plan, you're going to lose less money. Yeah, we'll talk you through this. We'll make sure you fully understand it, but it's a genuine way of protecting capital. And in my experience, there's not many financial advisors that really even know what this product is or have any experience in advising on it. But if they do, they often gloss over this one and just say, oh, you want the income now, don't you? Well, if you understood exactly how the deferred worked, I think we could challenge that. But we'll give you advice on the full range. The products themselves are properly protected. So the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, it will make sure that if the insurer goes bust, the income that you've bought is 100% protected for the rest of your loved one's life. So it's the same scheme that covers your money at bank, but at bank you're restricted to 85,000. So the reason people buy these, it is a true cap. Okay, it comes with a cost. You have a pot of money, you buy the annuity, that pot of money has significantly reduced, but what's left is ring fenced. As long as this has been set up properly to factor in fee increases, then you've got a genuine amount of money that's protected for your beneficiaries. That might, appeal, it might not appeal. What actually might be the key driver is to avoid the scenario of asking the local authority to fund your care. Now, isn't it apparent with all these changes? I know we've got a tax levy coming in to help pay for it, but I'm not sure it's going to touch the sides. So I think it's fair to assume that particularly for self-funders who've made a choice of a care home and then run out, the local authority are not guaranteeing to pay for that person. They may say, well, you could have gone into a much cheaper care home 5 years ago and you wouldn't have run out of money yet. You know, there's all sorts of things that are unknowns. So I think some families are just simply thinking, I'd rather opt out of the means tested system once and for all. We'll pay our own way, and this is a good way to do it because the income's guaranteed. There is a scenario where somebody could have bought one of these and no longer needs it, and that typically is if they qualify for state NHS funding a bit further down the road, so their health deteriorates and they get that continuing health care. They don't need the annuity income anymore. They still get it, okay, but it pays to them, not the care provider, and it would then suffer a small tax deduction, not 20%. Some of this money is treated as return of capital, but some of it would be taxed. So in the same way that our initial consultations are free of charge, we made the decision a number of years ago. It's our choice. It's not the way all business models work, of course not, but we're comfortable because of the volume of calls that we take and the fact that we can usually suss out whether a care annuity is going to be affordable or viable, so we don't waste people's time doing research. We've agreed to do the research and advise on this product for you with no cost, no obligation. If you end up taking one of these out, and you would only do that if it stacks up and if we think it's the appropriate thing for you, we would be paid a fee if a purchase is made, but that fee might be a little higher. I don't know, but it might be a little higher than a generalist IFA might charge, but hopefully you'd have every confidence that we know what we're talking about. And I think the fact that we haven't charged for the research, haven't charged for the report, that's the quid pro quo, because you don't know until you get the report and all the advice if you are going to be the person that buys or not. So it really does enable you to get all the facts in a balanced way, evidence if you're acting as attorney that you took professional advice, but not be presented with a bill if it turns out not to be right for you. So these are the insurance companies that offer these policies. That's just really for background information. None of them will deal with you direct. You have to come through an accredited advisor such as ourselves. And the good news is that there is 4, because for many years we just had 2. Legal & General joined the market in 2018 with this product, and National Friendly came in a year later. Both of those 2 companies selected Eldercare Solutions to pilot their product with. So that should sort of give you, again, additional peace of mind that we know what we're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have selected us for the pilot. And I think that's a wrap. This is just really, in closing, to give you an email address that you can use if you want to just ask any questions, or you can call our free phone number. It doesn't have to be me, my team. Well, actually, if you start drilling them about the care cap, they'll probably just quiver because they're a bit stressed out by it all at the moment. But they'll do their best. That's an office manned free phone number, office hours, I should say. And the Eldercare Group website has got quite a bit of information on as well. I've drawn your attention to that particular page of the website because it has a ready reckoner on it if you are interested in seeing a little more about how the care fee annuity might work, what it might cost. As long as you've got the individual's age, how much income they already have that they could put towards their fees, it will give you an average cost of the annuity based on our data of people with the same age, but you have to accept that they might have differing health conditions. But it's a good place to go just for a ballpark. We can get you the actual definite quote if you need them. Ooh, phone ringing there. So I will stop sharing at that point, and hopefully, I think that might be Dave.